Hi there, I'm Christy McDonald, and welcome to MiWeek. We are so glad that you're with us. We are finally just days away from what has to be one of the most contentious, surprising, numbing, stomach-churning, and intense presidential campaigns in history. We're devoting our show tonight to talking about where the race stands now, October surprises and all, plus why both Trump and Clinton are focusing back on Michigan and how voter turnout could be affected. And we will also look at how this impacts our state races. There is a lot to get to. Nolan Finley of the Detroit News is here, along with Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. You know, you go into a show like this and the show writes itself at this point, you know.
Sort of.
And guess what, gentlemen? Michigan is back in play. Did you think you'd be saying, hang on now, did you think you might be saying that in the last 5 days before the election?
And if anyone who's saying that, you should look at as if they've lost their mind. The state is not in play. The polls have tightened. So maybe she's not up, maybe Hillary Clinton is not up by 20 points or 15 points, and maybe 10 or 8. But the idea that this state would move into the Republican column for the first time since, what, 1988, with a candidate like Donald Trump is a really far, you would have to, so many unusual things would have to happen in terms of turnout in
like we
Democratic
haven't seen
areas.
unusual things this year.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you'd have to essentially put everyone in Detroit in jail that day and say, well, you're not voting because you're going to be in prison, so your votes don't count. I don't think that's the case. I do think that there's going to be an enthusiasm gap. She's not going to bring people out the way Obama did 4 or 8 years ago, and that's going to make it closer. But and in the national election, I mean, I think that's where there's some play in the joint. But in a state like Michigan, I just think it's absurd.
Well, you know, I would disagree. I mean, candidate time is the most valuable resource at this stage of an election. I can't remember in Michigan when we've seen the candidate, the come in, and both candidates come in
Friday,
in the last. He was here yesterday, or Monday, and he's coming back. I mean, for the candidates to spend this much time in the state in the last week, they are normally in Florida, they're normally in Ohio,
and they're in those states too.
Yeah, but Michigan is not a state that gets any attention in the last week of the campaign. Sometimes not even in the last month.
And they're getting a lot. There's a lot of ad buys that are now happening.
There's a lot of ad buys here
as well. And Bill Clinton came in on Wednesday night, so
to rally
last night
voters.
to rally out the vote.
So you've got, you know, they're seeing something in their internal polls.
What they're seeing is,
and you know, I heard last night that their internal polls show this deadlocked at this point. They're worried about that black voters are going to stay home. They're not going to vote in the numbers they did. They're seeing something, and if Michigan's in play, the whole election's in play.
So I know that you like to quote Nate Silver a lot, and 538. So I was noodling around on his site a little bit, and he said that yes, Trump has a path to victory.
Yes.
And he said, quote, it's 100% strategically correct for Trump to be campaigning in Michigan and Wisconsin right now.
Yeah, well, because
he's got to break one of the walls down.
Well, but no one has done it in 24, well, more than that, 26 years. No Republican candidate has been able to do that. So the idea that Donald Trump, the most unusual Republican candidate, the most offensive Republican candidate, is going to do it, I don't see how he gets past the hurdles that he's going to hit. Oakland County women, professional women in Oakland County, he's going to get crushed.
You look at Mitchell's last poll. He's closed.
Not Mitchell's poll.
You look at Mitchell's last poll. He's closed the gap with women to 8 points. And yeah,
8 points. That's not close.
He is probably the most detested Republican candidate who's ever run, as you say, running against the most detested Democratic candidate we've seen since George Wallace.
She's not detested by Democrats. She's detested by Republicans. He's detested by people on both sides.
And independents.
And lost some trustworthiness among Democrats as well.
And independents and that's where the battle's always won.
The question is, can the Democrats get the votes, the number of votes that they need from their own ranks to beat Donald Trump?
And that's where the enthusiasm gap comes into play.
I fully admit that there is an enthusiasm gap. We're seeing that in early voting in places like North Carolina, where black votes are not as heavy in early voting as they predicted, 15% down from 2012. There's no question that there's an enthusiasm gap. And I think that could throw the popular vote of the national election into some doubt. I think he might win the popular vote, or it certainly will be closer than what we have been predicting. The electoral path he has, though, is
tougher.
still much tougher because of states like Michigan, because of states like Wisconsin, which he really does not have a great chance to win. 8 points among
Yeah, that was
educated
the
women.
latest poll.
That's getting killed. Okay, it's not 50 points, it's not 27 points, but it's still not close.
You have to look at the independent vote, and that has shifted his way since the revelations of
Almost
the past
always
week.
does.
And you have more stuff coming out every day about Clinton Inc. That rattles voters. Are not sure whether indictments are going to come down after this election.
Well, we know he's going to go on trial after the election.
You're going to have Bill Clinton, you mean?
No, Donald Trump.
So they both could end up in the same courtroom. But you've got folks now saying, we're going to skip the presidential piece of the ballot and vote
people
down.
saying all kinds of
and
stuff, sure.
I think what you're seeing in the closing of this polls, Republicans are starting to come back home, and independents are shifting away.
We should make a
And
bet.
that-
We should make a bet about
what-
election day.
the question.
I'm confident enough about what's going to happen in Michigan that I would bet Hillary Clinton.
So are you just
wins
going to
Michigan.
just bet result, or are you going to bet by spread?
I don't
here?
know
Are
what
you
the
gonna do
margin
a-
is
or
going
you're
to be.
gonna
I
do a
don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be the 20-point margin that we were talking about a few months ago.
I still think because of the Democrats' superior get out the vote effort that she's got the better chance
he has
to win
no
Michigan.
operation to
but
do that.
I think it is awfully surprising, and it really does speak to the weakness of her candidacy that we're sitting here competing in Michigan, a state that's not been in play in 25 years. And if you look not just at the Mitchell poll, but there's other polls out there that show this race closing, and the Democrats' internal poll show it at almost a dead heat. That's amazing at this stage of the election. That tells me anything can happen nationwide.
GOP strategists in Washington are now talking about what to do come December 1. They understand that this is pretty much over. That there is going to be this sort of flashbang at the end of the campaign, that the polls will tighten, the race will be closer, the popular vote may be really close, but that the electoral path for this guy is so ridiculous at this point. I mean, you would have to, the things that would have to happen all simultaneously in multiple states to give him 270 electoral votes.
I don't think it's over by.
It's like betting on lightning.
Nolan just made the crazier things have happened motion.
Well, I mean, what's been predictable about this election campaign?
I want to talk a little bit about. I mean, you
Who would have
talk-
ever thought Bernie Sanders get 47% of the
vote here in
Democratic
Michigan.
vote?
Nolan, you talked a little bit about this is finally Republicans coming home or linking up behind Donald Trump. I want to talk about the events of the past week and a little bit about the FBI's role in this.
Yeah.
And do you think that James Comey overstepped his bounds?
Well, he certainly departed from standard practice, right? This is not the way that the FBI or the Justice Department handles things like this at election time. Everyone has said that, from Eric Holder to former Republican Justice Department officials. Everyone has come out and said, okay, he's doing something here that I wouldn't have done, that they shouldn't have done. You go beyond that and say, well, he did this without even having obtained a warrant for the computer that he was supposedly thinking these things were on. That makes it even more extraordinary. You move beyond that to the idea that he can't really say what it is he thinks might be in these emails that implicates Hillary Clinton. There again, this is out of a pattern of practice that I think raises a lot of questions about his judgment. What is he doing and why is he doing it? Now, I don't think James Comey is trying to sink the election for Hillary Clinton. I don't think that is his motivation. But I do think that there is something going on here that is not just about him doing his job the way he is supposed to, and it's having an effect on an election, which is the whole point of the practices that they had in place.
Except I would disagree with you on this point. He had already injected himself in the election, or injected
By
the FBI.
the other announcement.
When he came out in July and said, this investigation is over.
They also don't do
there's
that.
No,
Yeah.
There's no prosecution. At that point, from that point on, she was able to campaign and say, the investigation's over, I've been cleared. He had, if he was reopening the investigation after saying it was over, he had an obligation to tell the American people that. He had an obligation to follow up. Voters have a right to know that, and I think transparency is always the best policy. He should have, I think, and I think most Republicans agree, and the Congress agrees, he should have said, we really don't know what we have. We haven't looked at the emails, but I think it was appropriate to say, after saying it was closed, to say it's reopened.
But the reason
That's
to not
material
say
information
anything, But the reason to not say anything is the substantive reason, which is that you have no idea what it is you're even looking for. That doesn't rise to the level of the same kind of investigation that you had into the principal email search.
You don't know, and he doesn't know.
You don't know.
But if you've said the investigation is closed and now it's reopened, you have an obligation. Voters have a right to know that.
I think it plays also into the simplistic narrative that we can't trust anything happening in government now, and now we can't trust the FBI,
that's
and
simplistic.
that everything is rigged.
Well,
but I think you know, is it really proven?
I don't know. I think the bigger issue this week, and one that's going to last much longer than the email scandal, is this whole Clinton Inc. business. And I think the Wall Street Journal had a very excellent piece this morning about, and you got the Doug banned emails that really, if that stuff was happening in a private corporation, a public corporation, the SEC and the Justice Department would have already been in there.
So these are stories written by a former colleague of mine originally for The Atlantic months and months and months ago, and raised, dealt with, and sort of dismissed as not insignificant, but not proof of much beyond that there was this relationship between what they were doing with the Clinton Foundation and what they were doing privately. Again, there's an effort to make more of all of these things than what they actually are.
Now, Steve, you have the emails sort of taking this to a new level, and Doug Band almost boasting about a money laundering scheme where we take money from here, put it here, and then out it goes into Bill Clinton's pockets. I think this is serious business and something they're going to be dealing with for a long time.
It may.
All right, I want to bring this back around to, because we have talked about how things are tightening here in Michigan with the presidential race. We've talked so much this election season about what could happen at the top of the ticket, how that affects and impacts all the races there on down. So let's talk a little bit about the congressional races. Specifically, if there is a bit more tightening and you have Republicans a little bit more excited to go out and vote here in Michigan, does that help now a Mike Bishop who's running, and Dave Trott who's running as well, and maybe some other races, especially up north in the first?
I think it takes, you know, I don't know about that race. That's a whole nother matter. But I think the tightening of the race takes the down ballot races sort of off the table. They're going to be fought now on their own. It doesn't look like, unless these polls are dead wrong, there's going to be a surge one way or the other. And that's what wipes out down ballot races, the sort of huge turnout, lopsided turnout. I don't think you're going to see that. I'm not sure you're going to see a big turnout at all in this election, because I don't think Republicans are all that enthused, and I don't think Democrats are all that enthused. And, you know, there aren't that many other exciting issues on the ballot. You know, there's no Senate race.
I
got that on my list to talk about.
We've got school board in Detroit.
There's no like big state ballot proposals that get people all fired up. So I'm not sure we're going to see a big turnout in Michigan.
We're not going to see a huge turnout, but again, the lopsidedness of the Get Out the Vote organization is what will matter on Election Day. Donald Trump has spent no time building a Get Out the Vote organization. He has not had the help of the Republican Party to build one, and so getting his voters to the polls is going to have to happen organically. The Democrats are going to take their voters to the polls. They always do.
They always do. And go pick them up in the graveyard. And,
Oh, Nolan. Keeping the conspiracy going on. Exactly. Like there's not enough on my Facebook feed.
So as long as this race stays within 4 or 5 points, I don't think you're going to see a down ballot impact.
I mean, I never thought Mike Bishop was in trouble. I mean, I've always thought that, again, that's this sort of election fever everybody gets to say, oh, this race is tight.
A lot of money being spent there.
There's a lot of money being spent there. What they sense is an opportunity. But the polls never showed Susanna Shkreli with an advantage in that
but nobody's
race.
really polled that except for the candidates themselves.
Yeah,
and you can't always trust those.
It's showing that she's got a better chance than she ordinarily would. I don't think Mike Bishop...
That was back when it was a 12 and 13 point
I don't think he loses that race. I think the 7th probably stays Republican because of the way it's drawn. I think the first probably goes Democratic because of the particulars of that race and the candidate.
But that's an independent race. That's not
different,
tied to the presidential race, I think.
And the Democrats will pick up.
They've got their own issues.
They will pick up
there.
some House seats in Michigan. I don't know that they get beyond 58. I mean, getting the Republican majority down to 58.
And that's what I want to specifically ask about, because the Democrats have been trying to pour some money. They're trying to, they've got a tip, 9?
You know, here's the dynamic in the House race. You had a lot of Democratic House seats go Republican in 2010.
Yes.
Now those seats are term limited, so you've got all new candidates in, and I would expect some sort of normalization of the makeup. It's going to be a tighter House. I think Republicans keep control.
It's interesting. I always people talk to me about the fatigue they have about this election, and just that they're tired or they're fed up about it, or they don't particularly know what to do, or they can't stand reading about the presidential election anymore. And my thing to them is, do you know who's running for your state rep seat? Do you know what's happening in your city council?
There's a lot of stuff going on about
You can clip your coupon out of the Detroit News Monday. We'll tell you exactly how to vote in all those races.
Not exactly how to vote, but at least just learn about hyper-local, like what's happening
ours is actually
right
presented in a little easier fashion. We put a little dotted line around it.
Are you
a little
kidding me?
scissor
Are you kidding me?
so that you know.
Let's not distort.
Are you kidding me?
We have little scissors, and it's online. You can get it on your cell phone.
You can do it on your cell phone.
You could take
a
selfie.
Is there an app?
You could take a selfie with it.
No, you can't. No, you can't. That's not legal anymore.
That's not legal, Justin Timberlake. Okay, you cannot do that in the
I have been taking campaign selfies, voting selfies for years.
You take selfies of everything you do.
While you're actually voting, or afterwards you took a picture of yourself with the I voted sticker?
No. I take a picture of the ballot a lot of the time. I didn't know it was against the law. Well, no, I didn't know.
You're the most documented person in America.
That's edgy. That's
now they're not going to count my vote. See?
Yeah. Hey, and anything to do? I mean, I know that you guys had some different endorsements in terms of the Oakland County execs race. Anything with the week's last events? Do you think that will change that race?
No, I think if truly the presidential races has tightened up, I don't think you're going to see any big incumbent surprises. I'll be interested in seeing how the regional transit vote and that Wayne County tax vote goes. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether the voters are in a tax-raising mood. I think the campaign for the RTA has been just dismal. I don't think the ads have been all that effective in building a broad case for this, so it'll be interesting to see if they can prevail.
I'm pretty sure RTA passes because it's a majority of the region. It's not county by county. I think the only county that it's really in doubt is Macomb, and there won't be enough votes there to outweigh the rest of the region.
I'm not sure about Wayne, because Wayne's also got that big school tax increase, and so
I want to talk about that.
It's asking a lot for voters to go in there and pass two large increases, and schools are a little
clear
closer
about
to folks.
large, $80 a year.
That for the average house in Oakland County, it's $250.
You're talking about the school millage. That's only in Wayne County.
I'm talking about the RTA tax.
Right, the RTA tax is $100 a house on $100,000.
And if you own a $200,000 house,
it's $200 a year.
Like a lot of folks, it's $225.
Okay, so that's $20 a month.
Yeah, but you add that to the 200 and some you're paying. Now your tax bill's up $500, Steve. That's not insignificant.
Okay, thanks.
That's what I'm saying. With two big tax bills on, I don't think they both pass.
$500 a year.
It's a lot of money to most people.
Okay, I appreciate the math. I appreciate the math lesson, but hang on here. What's the will, though, in order for the Wayne County for the schools millage? I mean, are you?
What do you mean? What's the will?
In terms of are people? Do you have all the districts? You had a couple districts that weren't supporting putting that actually on the ballot.
You have 3 districts, I think, that said they didn't want it on. The rest of the districts all said they needed it, including districts that are wealthier and have more money. I don't know how the voters in Wayne are going to see that. I mean, it would be unusual to see it fail, I think.
Failed last time.
It failed the last time because of I think the climate when that was on was a little different.
They haven't done a whole lot to push it.
I think they have.
I mean, I live out there. I'm not getting a lot of stuff in the mail. I haven't seen or heard a lot about it. And, I think
the Livonia district pushing this really hard.
I'm not seeing any
superintendent. Superintendent was on my radio show this week talking about it with Randy Lipa.
And that gets you a few votes, but in terms of flyers and what have you, I've not been seeing a whole lot of that. And again, you've got 2 competing tracks. I don't think they'll both pass. I would say the school pet thing would generally have a better chance than the transportation one, because it's hard to understand.
All right, next Wednesday morning, I wake up and I get my Detroit News and I get my Detroit Free Press. What are the headlines going to say?
Oh, who knows?
I don't know.
Come on, make up a headline.
I think it says Clinton wins, but I think
we may not know.
We may not know.
I mean, I know about the popular vote. I mean, I think it's entirely possible
and
that
I
the popular
would,
vote be in doubt.
my biggest hope is that the popular vote and the electoral vote track. So you don't have a whole lot of people, you don't have to explain again what the electoral college is, and you don't have a lot
Let's
of
just
people
start
saying
over from
we was
scratch
robbed,
and change
you know?
the system totally. I think that people say that every 4
Well,
years.
they say it all the anytime the popular vote, and it's usually we haven't had a huge discrepancy.
It's only happened 3 times, I think, in history.
And it's not been a big discrepancy. I mean, if you come out with a fairly significant discrepancy, you're not going to be able to live with folks after this election.